Ladies and gentlemen, we stand each day at a crossroads, faced with two great forces that vie for our allegiance, faith and fear. Though invisible, their influence shapes every thought, decision, and destiny. Fear whispers with a convincing voice. It tells us that safety is found in retreat, that boldness is reckless, and that the shadows of uncertainty are too dark to endure. Fear, you see, is cunning. It wears the mask of prudence, convincing us that its paralysis is wisdom. Yet in truth, fear chains us, narrows our vision, and deafens us to the quiet call of courage. But faith, faith is a different matter. Faith does not deny the presence of uncertainty. It sees the storm but steps forward anyway. Faith is not blind, it is visionary. It trusts not because the path is clear, but because it knows the one who holds the map. Fear isolates us, turning our gaze inward until all we see is our own insufficiency. Faith, by contrast, lifts our eyes outward and upward. It reminds us that we are part of something greater, that the threads of our small stories are woven into a tapestry too grand for our comprehension. The real answer to faith is not in the knowledge of ourselves, but in the grace of our travel. Do not mistake faith for passivity. Faith is not the absence of action, but its truest form. It moves not because it has assurance of success, but because it has assurance of purpose. It steps into the unknown, not with arrogance, but with trust. Fear binds us to the moment. It holds us hostage to the tyranny of the immediate. Faith, however, transcends the present. It speaks in the language of eternity, reminding us that the trials of today are but a page in a much longer story. And so, my friends, the question is not whether we will face fear. It is certain we will, but whether we will let it rule us. Will we shrink back or rise up? Will we cling to fear's fleeting comfort or grasp the steady hand of faith? Choose wisely, for in that choice lies the shaping of your soul and the destiny of the world you touch. Thank you every day in ways both great and small. We are confronted with a choice, a universal and unrelenting one. It is the choice between faith and fear. This decision, though often subtle and unnoticed, shapes the course of our lives. It determines not only what we do, but also who we become. It is a choice that transcends cultures, eras, and circumstances. It is woven into the very fabric of our human experience. Fear speaks first in the language of instinct. It arises naturally, sometimes even before we can think. It tells us to avoid, to retreat, to seek safety at all costs. Fear, after all, is rooted in our desire to survive, and it often masquerades as wisdom. It urges caution when faced with risk, hesitation when confronted by uncertainty, and silence when boldness is required. There is, of course, a grain of truth in fear's voice. Prudence, foresight, and care are valuable, but fear often distorts these virtues, turning what could be thoughtful deliberation into crippling doubt. Faith, on the other hand, speaks more quietly. It does not shout for attention like fear. It requires listening. Faith invites us to trust, even when the way forward is unclear. It asks us to step into the unknown, to believe in a greater purpose, even when we cannot yet see the outcome. Faith does not dismiss the challenges or deny the risks. It acknowledges them fully, but it chooses to move forward despite them, not because of a guarantee of success, but because of a conviction that the journey is worth it. This choice between faith and fear is rarely easy. Fear often feels more natural, more immediate. It appeals to our sense of control, our desire to avoid discomfort or failure. Fear offers what seems to be an easier path. If we don't try, we can't fail. If we stay in our comfort zones, we won't face rejection or loss. Yet, in accepting fear's terms, we find ourselves shrinking. If we say we have no choice, and our worlds become smaller, our potential remains unrealized, and our souls grow restless with the knowledge of what might have been. End quote. Faith, by contrast, calls us to expand. It challenges us to step beyond the boundaries of what we know and into the realm of what could be. Faith invites us to see obstacles as opportunities, to view uncertainty not as a threat, but as a canvas on which the future can be painted. When we choose faith, we align ourselves with growth, with purpose, and with the possibility of transformation. Faith does not promise an easy path, but it offers a meaningful one. The choice between faith and fear is not confined to life's major crossroads. It is a choice we make in the small, everyday moments as well. Do we speak up for what we believe in, even when it's uncomfortable? Do we take the first step toward a dream that feels just out of reach? Do we trust in the goodness of others, or do we? Faith is not the absence of questions or doubts. It is the steady light that guides us through them. In a world often shrouded in uncertainty, where decisions must be made without full knowledge of outcomes, faith serves as a beacon of clarity. It does not eliminate the fog of life's complexities, but it pierces through it, offering direction when all else feels obscured. Faith is not blind. It sees deeply, illuminating truths that reason alone cannot always grasp. At its core, faith is an act of trust. It is the belief that there is a purpose, a design, a meaning that transcends the immediate chaos of our circumstances. When life feels uncertain or overwhelming, faith anchors us to something steady, something unshaken by the tides of change. It reminds us that clarity is not always about knowing every detail of the path ahead, but about having the courage to take the next step, trusting that the way will unfold. Clarity through faith does not mean life becomes simple or that answers come easily. It means that we can face complexity with confidence. Faith allows us to discern what truly matters when distractions, fears, and doubts threaten to pull us in every direction. It quiets the noise of the world and aligns us with a deeper, often quieter voice that speaks to our hearts and our purpose. Faith brings focus. It cuts through the clutter of competing priorities and fleeting desires, allowing us to see the horizon beyond the immediate storm. One of the great paradoxes of faith is that it often provides clarity precisely when circumstances seem the least clear. Consider those moments in life when we stand at a crossroads, unsure of which way to turn. Fear might urge us to stay where we are, paralyzed by the weight of uncertainty. Logic might offer conflicting solutions, each with its risks and rewards. But faith gives us the courage to move, even without a map. It reassures us that the path need not be fully visible to be the right one. Faith is not about ignoring reality or denying the challenges before us. It is about seeing beyond them. Where fear sees only obstacles, faith sees possibilities. Where doubt magnifies our limitations, faith whispers of potential. This shift in perspective can make all the difference. It transforms hesitation into action, despair into hope, and confusion into purpose. It is worth noting that faith is not confined to religious belief, though for many it is deeply rooted in spiritual conviction. Faith can manifest as trust in the goodness of humanity, belief in the power of love, or confidence in the value of perseverance. It is the force that drives a scientist to explore the unknown, and fear, for all its power and immediacy, is an illusionary tyrant. It presents itself as a force to be obeyed, a truth to be reckoned with, but its dominion is often built on shadows and distortions. Fear has an uncanny ability to magnify what is uncertain, distort what is true, and paralyze what might otherwise move with confidence and purpose. Its power lies not in its substance, but in its ability to persuade us that it is insurmountable. At its core, fear is a natural human response. It serves a purpose in alerting us to danger and prompting us to take precautionary action. Yet, in the modern world, fear often oversteps its bounds. It no longer confines itself to real and immediate threats, but extends its reach into the imagined and the speculative. It conjures up worst-case scenarios and presents them as inevitable. It amplifies doubts, turning them into certainties of failure or rejection. In this way, fear gains its foothold, not by truth, but by exaggeration. Fear thrives on our instinct to seek control. It tells us that if we stay within the confines of what we know, we can avoid pain, disappointment, or failure. It masquerades as wisdom, convincing us that risk is recklessness and boldness is folly. But this is the great deceit of fear. It promises safety and certainty, while delivering stagnation and regret. In truth, fear often keeps us from living fully, shrinking our world to the size of our anxieties. The illusion of fear's power is most evident when we confront it. How many times have we dreaded a conversation, a task, or a decision, only to find that the reality was far less daunting than our anticipation of it? Fear loses its grip when faced with action. It cannot withstand the clarity and courage that come with movement. The moment we step forward, however tentatively, fear begins to unravel. What seemed impossible in the shadow of fear often becomes manageable, even transformative, in the light of action. Fear also preys on isolation. It tells us that we are alone in our struggles, that no one else faces the doubts or uncertainties we do. This sense of isolation deepens fear's hold, making it seem all. Faith and fear are two unseen forces that shape the human experience in profound and opposing ways. Both are intangible, yet their effects are unmistakable. They influence how we perceive the world, how we respond to challenges, and ultimately, how we live our lives. Though they may seem like polar opposites, faith and fear share a curious similarity. They both demand that we believe in something we cannot fully see, instead of seeing something we cannot fully feel. The difference lies in the direction they point us and the fruit they bear in our lives. Fear is often the first to arrive. It is immediate and visceral, rooted in our instinct for survival. At its most basic, fear is a response to danger, a signal that urges caution or retreat. In its proper context, fear can be a valuable ally, protecting us from harm. But fear, unbridled and unchecked, has a way of taking over. It whispers lies, magnifies uncertainties, and creates barriers where none should exist. Fear thrives on what is unknown, convincing us that the worst-case scenario is not only possible but inevitable. The nature of fear is constriction. It narrows our focus, blinding us to possibilities and trapping us in cycles of doubt and hesitation. Fear often feels like wisdom because it is cautious and calculating, but it lacks the vision to see beyond immediate concerns. It isolates, convincing us that we are alone in our struggles and that stepping out of our comfort zones will lead to ruin. Fear, when given control, becomes a tyrant that rules by limiting our freedom and stifling our growth. Faith, by contrast, is expansive. Where fear shrinks, faith grows. Where fear isolates, faith connects. Faith is not the absence of doubt, but the willingness to move forward despite it. It is a belief in something greater than the immediate and tangible, a conviction that there is purpose, meaning, and hope beyond what our eyes can see. Faith does not deny the existence of challenges or risks. It simply refuses to be defined or constrained by them. The nature of faith is trust. It trusts in the unseen, in the possibility of good, and in the idea that even amidst uncertainty, there is a path worth walking. Faith is not blind optimism or naive cheerfulness. It is a deliberate choice to believe in what could be, rather than being paralyzed by what might go wrong. Faith acknowledges fear but does not bow to it. It moves forward, not because all doubts are resolved, but because it believes that the journey itself holds value. Fear and faith both have the power to shape the stories we tell ourselves. Fear tells a story of limitation, failure, and inadequacy. It says, you cannot, you should not, and you must not. Faith is often thought of as a belief, a state of mind, or an internal conviction. While these aspects are true, faith, at its core, is much more than a passive stance. It is a dynamic force that calls for action. True faith does not merely reside in thoughts or feelings. It manifests in the choices we make, the risks we take, and the steps we dare to walk into the unknown. Faith without action is incomplete, like a seed that is never planted, or a light that is hidden under a basket. Action is the natural expression of faith. When we believe in something deeply, it stirs us to move. Consider the person who believes in the possibility of reconciliation. They take the first step toward forgiveness. Or the entrepreneur who trusts in the value of their idea. They invest time, energy, and resources to bring it to life. Faith gives birth to action, and in turn, action strengthens faith. Each step forward becomes a testimony to the trust that motivated it, reinforcing the belief that the journey is worth it. Faith-driven action is not about reckless leaps or unconsidered risks. It is about stepping forward with purpose, even when the path ahead is uncertain. It recognizes that waiting for perfect clarity often leads to inaction. Faith does not require all the answers before moving. It asks for trust in the process and confidence in the unseen. This is not to say that faith dismisses careful thought or planning, but it refuses to be paralyzed by the fear of the unknown. Procrastination is critical to help us see the fear of the unknown. One of the most powerful aspects of faith in action is its transformative nature. Action fueled by faith has a way of changing not only our circumstances, but also ourselves. It challenges our limits, stretches our capacities, and deepens our character. When we step out in faith, we often discover strengths we did not know we had. We find courage where we once felt fear, resilience where we once faced doubt, and growth where we once saw obstacles. Faith also brings a unique perspective to failure. In the realm of faith, failure is not an endpoint, but a step along the journey. When actions motivated by faith do not yield the desired result, they still carry meaning and purpose. They teach us, refine us, and prepare us for future opportunities. Faith reframes failure as a necessary part of the process, encouraging us to persist even when the outcome is uncertain. Furthermore, faith-driven action is contagious. When others witness someone create some wonderful outcome, a story has contagious power. An eternal perspective reshapes the way we see life, influencing our values, decisions, and responses to challenges. It is a lens through which the temporary gains context and the transient finds meaning. By stepping outside the narrow confines of the present moment, we begin to grasp the broader narrative of existence, a story not confined by time, but rooted in eternity. This perspective is not just a philosophical exercise, but a transformational approach to life that brings clarity, hope, and purpose. Life often feels overwhelming with its myriad demands, uncertainties and challenges. Deadlines, conflicts, and ambitions compete for our attention, urging us to focus on the immediate. The urgent often overshadows the important, leading us to prioritize what is fleeting over what is enduring. An eternal perspective invites us to pause and consider what truly matters. What will remain when the noise of the present fades? This shift in focus helps us see beyond the surface, aligning our lives with deeper, more enduring truths. This is a dangerously complicated relationship because it takes two. One of the most profound impacts of an eternal perspective is how it reframes suffering and adversity. Pain, disappointment, and loss are inescapable parts of the human experience, and when viewed solely through a temporal lens, they can feel unbearable. However, when seen in the light of eternity, these hardships take on a different character. They are no longer meaningless or final, but are instead moments of refinement, opportunities for growth, and steps on a larger journey. The difficulties of today, though real and often painful, are temporary. They do not have the final word. This perspective brings a sense of hope and resilience, empowering us to endure and even find purpose in our struggles. September the 17th. Similarly, an eternal perspective transforms our understanding of success and achievement. In a world that measures success by wealth, status, or recognition, it is easy to become trapped in a cycle of striving for things that ultimately cannot last. The accolades of this world fade, possessions deteriorate, and even the most celebrated legacies are eventually forgotten. Yet, when viewed through an eternal lens, success is redefined. And when we viewed through an eternal lens, success is redefined. It is no longer about accumulating treasures on earth, but about investing in what will endure: character, relationships, and acts of love and service. A life lived with eternity in mind values integrity over popularity, generosity over accumulation, and purpose over self-centered ambition. Relationships gain profound significance when seen through the lens of eternity. In the busyness of life, it is tempting to prioritize tasks, achievements, or personal goals over meaningful connections. Yet, an eternal perspective reminds us that relationships are among the few things that carry lasting value. Time spent nurturing bonds with others, offering kindness, forgiveness, and support, is never wasted. These acts echo into eternity, shaping not only our lives, but the lives of those around us. When we live with this awareness, we begin to prioritize people over possessions, presence over productivity, and love over convenience. Mindfulness Within, Part 2. Are we living in alignment with our deepest self? An eternal perspective also brings a sense of hope and assurance in a world often marked by injustice, suffering, and uncertainty. It acknowledges the brokenness of the present, but refuses to see it as the ultimate reality. Instead, it looks forward to a time of restoration, renewal, and ultimate justice. This hope is not escapism, it is a source of strength that enables us to face challenges with courage and determination. Knowing that the story does not end with the struggles of today gives us the motivation to persevere and to work for good, even when the outcomes are uncertain. This perspective also fosters a sense of humility and gratitude. When we view life as part of a much larger story, we recognize that our place in it, while significant, is not central. We are part of something greater than ourselves, and this awareness shifts our focus from self-centered ambition to a life of service and contribution. Gratitude naturally flows from this realization as we come to see the blessings in our lives not as entitlements, but as gifts. Each moment, each relationship, and each opportunity becomes a reason for thankfulness. Living with an eternal perspective requires intentionality. It is not the default mode of thinking in a culture that often prioritizes instant gratification and immediate results. It calls for moments of reflection, for stepping back from the rush of daily life to consider the bigger picture. Practices such as meditation, prayer, or quiet contemplation can help cultivate this mindset, reminding us of what truly matters. Surrounding ourselves with others who share this perspective can also provide encouragement and accountability, helping us stay focused on what is lasting. An eternal perspective does not negate the importance of the present. Rather, it enhances it. It reminds us that every moment, every choice, and every interaction carries significance. The way we live today echoes into eternity, shaping not only our destiny, but also the lives of those we touch. This awareness imbues even the smallest actions with meaning, transforming the mundane into the sacred. In embracing an eternal perspective, we are freed from the tyranny of the immediate and the fear of the unknown. We begin to see life not as a series of disconnected events, but as a purposeful journey, guided by values that endure beyond the confines of time. This perspective brings peace in the face of uncertainty, hope in the midst of challenges, and joy in the recognition that our lives are part of a much larger, more beautiful story. It is a way of living that transcends the temporary and aligns us with what truly matters, allowing us to navigate life with clarity, purpose, and hope. Fear is a weapon, perhaps one of the most effective and insidious tools wielded by those forces that seek to keep us from our purpose, potential, and fulfillment. While fear in its natural form can serve as a protective instinct, alerting us to danger and guiding us to safety, it is when fear is manipulated and distorted that it becomes a tool of the enemy. In this form, fear is not just an emotion or a reaction. It is a strategy designed to paralyze, to isolate, and to undermine. At its core, fear thrives on uncertainty. It preys on the unknown, and in doing so, it exaggerates our doubts and magnifies our worries. It transforms small uncertainties into insurmountable obstacles and casts shadows over even the brightest possibilities. The enemy uses fear not as a means of simply cautioning us, but to create an environment of paralysis. Fear suggests that the worst will happen, that failure is inevitable, and that risk is too dangerous to be worth taking. It convinces us that the unknown is too perilous to explore, urging us to shrink back into the safety of our comfort zones. In this way, fear becomes a cage, limiting our movement, creativity, and growth. Fear's greatest strength is its ability to distort reality. It often tells us lies dressed as truth. A single setback becomes proof that we will always fail. A rejection turns into evidence that we are unworthy. Fear transforms our perceptions, turning them into magnified shadows of what is actually true. This distorted view prevents us from seeing the opportunities that lie on the other side of the risk. It focuses our attention on potential failure rather than the possibilities for success. Fear, in its deepest form, limits our vision and clouds our ability to see beyond the immediate and uncertain. One of the enemy's most effective tactics through fear is to keep us isolated. Fear thrives in solitude, where it whispers in our minds and convinces us that we are alone in our struggles. When we are isolated, fear grows stronger, as it has no external voices of reason or support to challenge its distortions. It convinces us that we are the only ones who struggle with such doubts, fears, and insecurities. In isolation, we begin to internalize these fears, believing that they are not only true, but insurmountable. The lie of isolation deepens fear's grip and makes it far more difficult to break free. Fear also exploits our desire for control. The enemy uses fear to convince us that if we can just control every variable, if we can predict every outcome, we will be safe. The false promise of safety through control keeps us trapped in a cycle of overthinking and perfectionism. Fear tells us that only by knowing everything, by preparing for every possible outcome, can we avoid failure. This desire for control, however, only leads to greater anxiety and more fear. We cannot control the future, nor can we predict every risk. And yet fear convinces us that this is the only way to find security. The result is a life lived in constant tension, where peace is never fully attained because the illusion of control is always slipping through our fingers. Another aspect of fear's manipulation is its ability to make us believe that we are powerless. The enemy uses fear to make us believe that we are too weak, too flawed, or too insignificant to make a difference. Fear builds a narrative of inadequacy and failure, often rooted in past experiences, that keeps us from moving forward. This narrative suggests that even if we try, we will never succeed, that the risk is not worth it, and that others are more capable than we are. Even if we are never successful, the risk is not worth it, and that others are more capable than we are. It presents an image of ourselves that is smaller than the truth. When we believe the lie of fear, that we are powerless, it becomes easy to give up, to retreat, and to accept a life of quiet resignation. In the end, fear may never fully disappear. It is a natural part of the human experience. However, when we recognize it as a tool of the enemy, we can stand firm in the face of it. We can choose to act in faith, to believe in truth, and to move forward despite the lies fear tells. Fear may come, but it does not have to dictate the course of our lives.